everyone, David Aragona and Craig Milkowski are taking a look at one of the graded stakes events on Saturday at Belmont at the Big A. Race 8 on this 11 race aqueduct card is the Grade 2 Mother Goose going a mile and an eighth on the main track. And Craig, this is the first year that they've resituated the Mother Goose in the fall. It used to be run in the spring to early summertime. And I think just based on the initial field that they've drawn for this fall Mother Goose, it's worked because we've got a nice group of 7 runners, including quite a bit of talent drawn towards the outside of the starting gate.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I would say there's even a couple horses I would not have been surprised if they were in the Breeders' Cup this staff. So maybe looking for a little bit easier spot, but did definitely get some quality.
Yeah, 2 of the major players in this race are the number 6 Kijera, who I did peg as the 6-5 morning line favorite coming off an impressive victory at Churchill Downs, as well as the number 5 Occult, who was grade 1 placed last time in the Cotillion at Parks. Let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector to get a sense of how these horses might shake themselves out in the early stages. And the number 6 Kijera, Craig, I think what gives her the big advantage from a pace standpoint over her main rival is that she's got that tactical speed where she can be forwardly placed. She's drawn well outside of other horses that want to be forward. It feels like Julien Lebrun is going to be in the driver's seat in this race.
It does. He drew perfectly given her running style. She's not necessarily a horse that has to go to the front. She's run fine from just off the pace. And I suspect if I was going to manually make this pace projector, I might shift the 6 a little bit back behind the 4. But in the end, it's still going to give her a pretty big tactical advantage over her main rivals.
Yeah, Chad Brown does have 3 runners in this race. The number 4 undervalued asset is clearly the fastest of them early, so it would not be a surprise to see her get sent to the lead, but that probably wouldn't bother Julien Lebrun on the number 6 Kijera at all. Let's go through this field, mostly in post-position order, beginning with the number 1 Foggy Night, and we'll go 2 back at her past performances to take a look at her most recent victory in the Catherine Sophia at Parks. This was supposed to be her prep race for the Cotillion. The Cotillion, Craig, just turned out to be too tough a race for her. Not a big surprise. She was 31-1 that day, but this was a solid effort, the best speed figure that she's earned so far. She probably is one who will appreciate getting back on a fast track, having not run as well on wet tracks in 2 races over sloppy sealed tracks, but just wonder about her class at this level.
She has her work cut out for her in this spot. We saw her make that jump into the Cotillion. It didn't work out too well. And even though this might seem an easier spot being a grade 2 as opposed to that one being a grade 1, not necessarily the way it's turned out given some of the horses that have shown up. So she gets a good inside draw. I guess if you think she could get back to her Catherine Sophia, maybe she'd be an exotics player. But as you note, this is really a pretty tough spot.
The number 2 is Peak Popularity, who really does feel like the outsider in this race. She'll be the biggest price of the 3 Chad Brown runners in here, and she definitely handles the distance. I don't think that's of concern at all because she's gone as far as a mile and a quarter and has won. Her speed figures are just way too slow to be competitive here, and she's coming out of a weak race even for the N1X level in an off-the-turf affair last time, so she'd be a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, she's the rank outsider. She hasn't even hit the 95 mark on Timeform US speed figures, and we'll see the Kijera, the favorite, has run a 120 plus. So that's just way too big a hurdle for me.
Next up, let's take a look at the Grade 1 Ashland from all the way back in the springtime at Keeneland, because we've got a couple of runners coming out of this race, including the winner, Defining Purpose, along with the number 3, Julia Shining. We'll talk about Julia Shining in just a second, but let's skip to the outside of the starting gate to mention Defining Purpose first, Craig, and this was her at her best. She was an upset winner this day at 20-1, but I think since then, she's validated this performance with that victory in the Indiana Oaks and then running a respectable 3rd against Top Company in the Grade 1 Alabama 2-back, another one that's handled a mile and a quarter, so a mile and an eighth, certainly not a problem for her. And I guess it's easy to excuse her Cotillion because she might have just not liked the sloppy track.
Yeah, it could be that way because she'd been a very consistent filly. She'd been getting a better every time out, or at least running the same and then showing mild improvement. And she definitely regressed there, but maybe it was the track. Even so, on her best day, she's probably got her work cut out for her, given the 2 drawn to her inside. But her best races could give her a chance.
And then the number three, Julia Shining, she's got a lot of questions to answer here, Craig, because that was probably her best race when she was third behind Defining Purpose in the Ashland. Was off for a long time after that, missed the Kentucky Oaks, missed multiple summer targets, made her return to the races last time in the Alabama, a pretty ambitious spot off a layoff, trying to go a mile and a quarter. She was in the mix down the backstretch, but just with a half mile to go, was basically completely empty, got eased at the end of that race. That's not the way you want to return. Now they're coming back for another start in the fall. The distance is supposed to work for her, but I have major questions about her current form.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Anytime you lose by 57 lengths, you have to wonder what happened. And she was a filly I actually was not a big fan of. I was always betting against her after her slow win in the Demoiselle as a 2-year old. But when she ran into the Ashland, which we showed, I actually thought maybe she turned a corner and might be a horse worth following. But something clearly went amiss. She always gets bet. I didn't have the morning line when I did this. I'm not sure what you made her, but whatever it is, I suspect she'll probably get a little bit bet a little bit heavier than what she probably deserves.
The number four is Undervalued Asset. Let's take a look at her race two back when she was second in the Charlestown Oaks. And no disgrace losing to a horse like Vava, Craig, who did finish ahead of her twice in her last four starts, because Vava was a pretty impressive winner of the Raven Run last weekend with, I forget what number you gave her, but I know she got a 101 buyer in that race. That came up a very fast race. And Undervalued Asset did regress a little bit last time, but she was facing older horses in the Gallant Bloom. Maybe that was just a slightly tougher field than what she's been accustomed to. The question with her is the distance, because she's never gone beyond a mile. That 1 mile race all the way back at Gulfstream in March was not a good effort, though she was setting a fast or contesting a fast pace that day, also racing on a rail that wasn't the place to be. So maybe you can excuse it, but 9 furlongs still seems like it's a big ask for her.
I have no knowledge if this is the case, but I almost wonder if she's entered as somewhat of a rabbit to keep things honest for Chad Brown's other runner, who we're going to get to, having never been well, she's been 2 turns at Charlestown, but having never been the distance. It seems like there's a good chance that she's going to be on the lead and just maybe trying to ensure an honest pace, but it seems a lot to ask to get her in the winner's circle.
The Chad Brown runner that seems most dangerous in here is the number five, Occult. Let's take a look at her victory two back in the Monmouth Oaks, and she was pretty impressive this day, making a big move around the far turn to take over at the quarter pole, and she just continued to widen her advantage through the stretch. And I thought she came back and validated this effort in the Cotillion last time, Craig. That was a sloppy track. She never had great position that day, tried to work her way through traffic around the far turn, never stopped running after the gate to wire winner Ceiling Crusher. She's just in great form right now. We'll see how the pace works out for her in this spot.
She's one of those rare horses that just keeps getting better every single time out. She's improved her speed figure 6 consecutive times since her debut, and did so even in defeating the Cotillion. And she lost to 2 very good horses in there, in Ceiling Crusher and Pretty Mischievous. So nothing to be ashamed of there. The negative for her is the possible pace scenario where she has to make up a lot of ground on Kijira, but she certainly has some talent and is a major player.
And the real key to this race is the number six, Kijera, because her switch back to dirt last time was a dazzling performance. Yes, she got a great trip sitting on top of a moderate pace, but the way that she accelerated away from that field at the quarter pole and continued to widen her advantage, geared down at the end of that race, was seriously impressive. And she was beating some good horses. She's looking lucky and taxed. I mean, they've run some big races already this season. Maybe she's a horse that should have been on dirt all along, because she actually ran pretty well as a 2-year-old in the Alcibiades. She certainly liked switching back to the dirt last time.
Yeah, she was a horse I suspected. I know in our pace cast I had mentioned that I really wanted to see her back on dirt. And when she got there, boy, did she like it. Running a 122 speed figure. After that race, I actually thought she might be a filly who would be pointed towards the Breeders' Cup this day if it was that impressive her performance. And given her tactical edge, she is going to be very tough to beat if she reproduces that race.
Yeah, Phil Bauer, the connections, they toyed with going to the Breeders' Cup Distaff, and I was reading, and I believe our colleague David Gretting's advance for the race, that he just wants to see it again. Even he's not sure if she's going to be able to repeat that last effort, but wants to get some validation of it in this Mother Goose, and I think we all do as well. Let's throw up our picks for this race, and Craig, you're going to go with that number 6, Kijera. Not only does she have the best last out speed figure, but she's supposed to get the right trip in this race.
She is. She doesn't necessarily have to have the lead like she does on the pace projector, but I think she's going to get a pretty big head start. But I don't want to totally dismiss a cult, the horse that you like, because if the pace gets a little contested, she improves again, she can be right there with Kijira. So I'm looking forward to this race as just a fan of the sport.
Yeah, it's not just because we're coming up on Halloween week. I do think that this race fits a cult pretty well. She's been improving with every start, like you said. And even though she might be somewhat pace compromised, she's got that turn of foot that we saw in the Monmouth Oaks and in the Cotillion that might be able to get her into contention, even if they're not moving that quickly up front. So I'm going to go for the number 5, a cult, the number 6, Kijera for Craig in the Grade 2 Mother Goose on Saturday at Belmont at the Big A. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.